1 Corinthians chapter 5, dealing with church discipline. And we talked a lot about, dealing with those and the reason why. And I think that, and I hope that last week I remind us the difference of the necessity of withdrawing from someone and the necessity of a situation where that's not necessary. Someone who desires to stay in the assembly and continue in sin, that person must be withdrawn from. The person that leaves so that they can live a sinful life, though there's no withdrawing because they've left. So in other words, there's not sin in the camp. This man who had his father's wife, that's the specific situation that's dealt with. He wanted to continue to worship and work with the church there at Corinth. And so Paul said, look, he can't come and do that. You have to put him outside of the camp. And because if you have a little leaven in the lump, what happens to the lump? The whole thing becomes leavened. And so he said, put that old leaven away so that you could be a new, unleavened lump there. And that's what we want to be. We have to put sin out. Okay. When should we withdraw? Obviously, we talked about that. Several attempts. Now, in Matthew chapter 18, we haven't read that yet, have we? Let's go to Matthew chapter 18, and let's read what the Lord says here concerning this. And right up front, we get the opportunity to see that there is a difference. I know we go to Matthew 18 for withdrawal, but you can only take that so far, because Matthew 18, 15 through 17 is dealing with an interpersonal situation. So they're not apples to oranges necessarily, but they're not one-to-one either. Well, what does he say? Who is doing the speaking? That's Jesus. Of course, to whom is he speaking? He's speaking to those that, well, to whom is he speaking? Well, he's speaking to all of his disciples, not just his apostles, but to his disciples. So those that believe on him, that's who he's speaking to. And so Jesus says, moreover, if thy brother trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. All right? Hang on 1 second. So already we see that there's a difference between what Matthew 18 is talking about, Jesus, and what Paul is discussing in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. There's a difference. Jesus is talking about an interpersonal situation. I said something nasty to Gloria, and she went on her way because she's so sweet, she's not going to say anything. And later, she says, she's got to come to me, Byron, you said something very, very ugly. I didn't like that. That hurt my feelings, okay? And you did it in front of a lot of people. That really wasn't good, was it? So, you see, she's got to come to me. That's what Jesus says. Okay? Verse 16. Well, I'm stubborn. Okay? Right? I'm stubborn. But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee one or two more, that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. So now Gloria, because I said I didn't do anything, now she's got to bring Ricardo and Cookie and Julius in the conversation now. So now it's got to be the 4 of us, you see, a little bit larger group. Verse 17. So that everything, of course, can be established. Verse 17. And if he shall neglect to hear them, then you have to tell it to the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as an heathen man and a publican. So this is a situation where someone has sinned against another church member, let's say. And then I sinned against Gloria, but it's Gloria's responsibility to come to me and say, Byron, you sinned against me. Well, no, I didn't. That's just not what the case. Well, then you grab some other people and you say, I need your help. Let's go to Byron because he did this. And sin, is sin done in a corner? No. Most of the time when there's actual sin being done, and it's not just hurt feelings, this is, sinful activity. Especially if, let's say, Gloria, let me think of a situation since, it's us. Let's say that I didn't like where you put the cups at a fellowship meal. And in front of everybody, Gloria, I told you 5 times to put those cups over here and not over there. And I just dress you down, right? Now, is that good to do that? I don't think that that's right, as a matter of fact. In front of everybody, you see. Now, if it was just the 2 of us, I had said something to you before. Well, that might be a different situation, because that's a personal situation. That's not a everybody. You see what I'm saying? So now I've taken it too far. Well, you're very sweet. You're not going to say anything to me right then. But later you've got to say something. Brian, what you did was not right. Well, we had this conversation, blah, 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 right? And what's the very first thing that people do when someone comes to them and says, you sinned? What's the very first thing? It's not my fault. You got to blame everybody else but me. You have to deflect. Eve did it. Okay, absolutely. Eve did it. Adam did it. Unfortunately, the devil couldn't deflect anywhere. So the buck kind of stopped with him. But that's what human beings do. So now it's escalated. We as parents might have to deal with our little ones. And it's, I told you not to do that. You might have to tap their hand or just speak to them or whatever. And then they get all uppity and defiant. It was just a simple, situation. Don't do that anymore. But they have ramped it up. Do people ramp things up? And then they're grounded for the rest of their lives when, they just shouldn't have eaten the cookie before supper. You're like, how did we get here? Parents, have you asked yourself that? How did we get here? Well, that's kind of what's going on here. People, unfortunately, ramp things up, and they just don't back down to the degree that then what was a one-to-one situation that should have been taken care of one-to-one winds up involving the whole congregation. And that's, and why? Because that's human nature. So from that standpoint, then we do kind of get into the, okay, well, Byron, if you don't change, we're going to have to withdraw from you, you see. So what might begin as an interpersonal situation could go into withdrawal fellowship. I mean, hopefully that doesn't happen, but weirder things have happened, I'm sure. And over nothing, right? And over nothing. That's how human beings are. Okay, so that's the correlation and the connection between what Jesus is talking about in Matthew chapter 18 and what Paul is talking about in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. This is C. Is it just as wrong today for members of the Lord's church to tolerate fornication, idolatry, just any kind of bad behavior as it was in Paul's day? We look around today, do we see glorification of fornication? Do we see glorification of adultery? Do we see glorification of homosexuality? Glorification even of things that we would think Well, everybody believes that to be wrong. Murder, do we even see sometimes people glorifying murder? Or lying? Or stealing? There are all kind of different situations where people say, oh yeah, you should do that. The man up in New York who murdered that CEO gentleman. I don't know any of their names. I just know that happened. And it was a while back. There are a lot of people who celebrated that man killing the CEO. The man's walking down down the sidewalk in New York City and gets murdered. And people think that that's a good thing. So you would think that, no one would think that murder is acceptable. Well, guess what? They do. So you can't, all those things are wrong then, they are still wrong today. D, can the lives of unrepentant sinners in God's house hinder the efforts of even the best workers? Well, yes, because if the church has a reputation of, that church has this person there, then it doesn't matter what kind of a good person you are. It does not matter that you are preaching the pure gospel of Christ. You have no credibility because there's sin in the camp, you see. And so it doesn't matter about all of those things. So when you have an unrepentant sinner in the midst, then your best workers, their efforts are going to come to nothing. All right, E, do you think teaching on this subject has been neglected by preachers, teachers, and elders? Do we talk about this subject very often?
Talking about here or across the board?
Yes, here at Cape Fear, but just in general. Just in general. I mean, I really don't know any congregation unless it is something that they are dealing with right then. I really don't know any congregation, and I'm talking about, really good congregations too. We just don't talk about this particular subject. Again, not unless we have to deal with it, right now. And then the subject might get broached. And then sometimes not even then. Sometimes not even then. So it just is not. And that's a sad situation, but that's just the reality. Okay, and then F. Why, or rather, what could be the reason or the reasons for this neglect? Does anybody have any thoughts? I mean, I have my thoughts, but do you have any thoughts, Ricardo?
That whoever's giving the lesson or the discussion doesn't want to hurt somebody's feelings.
Okay, don't want to hurt feelings, absolutely. Oh, we might offend if we talk about this particular subject, yeah, absolutely.
Your congregation may get smaller.
Yes.
That's the thing is, life is spiritual life. Let me put it very specifically. Spiritual life is like the game of golf. In the game of golf, if you want to hit it to the right, guess what you have to do? You have to aim left. If you want to hit it to the left, you have to aim right. It is a game of opposites, okay? Well, spiritually speaking, when you want to do something like increase your numbers, you know what you do? You do the opposite of what everybody thinks you ought to do. $100 lucky seat is not going to bring the masses in, folks. I know we might think that it is. It's not going to do it. The thing about it is, here, we'll go to, let's go to Acts chapter 5. Let's go to Acts chapter 5. And you have the first real situation of discipline in Acts chapter 5. And Ananias and Sapphira conspired against God because they wanted notoriety. And after they were disciplined, look at verse 11. And great fear came upon all the church and upon as many as heard these things. And so they looked at these things and they said, oh, we've got to be very, very careful. And you keep going down. Let's see. Well, the passages, you might get to it before I do. That because of this, the numbers just kept growing and growing. And they were multiplied. And so it was not a situation where, discipline occurred, therefore, maybe we just don't want to be a part of this anymore. Discipline occurred, and actually the numbers grew greater. When there's discipline, boundaries, we're going to grow. When there is benevolence and help, we're going to grow. When there's fairness, we're going to grow. And so as it relates to all of these things, then, you think, well, if we broach this particular subject, such as the subjects we're talking about in our sermons this past month and even going forward, they're not the easiest sermons to preach or probably to listen to, but they're necessary. Hey, Christians aren't involved in these things. Don't be involved with these situations. And so the preacher, the elders, have to set up those boundaries and make sure everybody understands, here's the boundaries here. Because without them, what happens to the sheep? When there's no fence for the sheep just go everywhere and they wind up in the ditch. They wind up, falling into the water. They wind up going over the cliff. All those things. And then before long, you don't have a flock anymore. So you have to have those fences to keep everyone safe. It is for everyone's good, not just so, I'm just going to tell you what to do, something of that nature. That has nothing to do with it whatsoever. But the reason why many do not fear of, offending others, just being afraid of the subject altogether, maybe embarrassment, hypocrisy, maybe the leadership has problems of their own, if not personally, in their family. And so if they taught on this subject, then they would have to perhaps withdraw from a family member, you see. And so they don't want to do that. I believe that the last one there is really, unfortunately, the reason why this subject isn't taught about, and that is ignorance. Just because too many leaders of the Lord's people do not even know what to do in this situation. Don't even know about the subject. And so preachers and elders alike. And so that's why it is not taught at all, a lot. Anyway, all right, Namika?
Another thing could be contentment. A lot of congregations are content with the state of how things are. And
Right.
they don't want to ruffle feathers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yes.
Let's just keep things, at a state captain, and hopefully, they won't have to be ready to actually give an answer.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want, just the status quo, No, and obviously we can't do that. So, yeah, but you're exactly right. Yes, sir.
Do you think that there are sins that would be more difficult, or do you think that are there sins that would be more difficult to do this? At least that might be part of the reason. For example, I'll use this. So if I go out and I go to Comanche and I just shoot the clerk, and I say I come on next Sunday
Right, yeah,
And so I think there's some sins that it would be easier to do something and say, oh, or if I start stealing money out of the contribution,
mm-hmm,
well, he needs to pay for that.
right,
Or you think there's some sins that are more difficult, and that may be why, that may lead to, and I'm gonna go and just say it, you talk about fornication, unscriptural relations like that, that just
mm-hmm, yeah.
What do you mean by more difficult? Do you mean more difficult to
well,
get rid of like you have a sin that you're really having trouble getting rid of? Or do you mean it's more severe sin?
all
Even
sins,
though all sins.
It's,
are
it's,
guilty.
it's more difficult to address directly and,
Is that what you mean?
and promptly.
all sin is wrong.
Yes,
Right.
But
yes,
let's also acknowledge that
Mhm.
there's some sins that in the eyes in the world, and even among us, we would be more gassed at
right,
than, we would be more upset at, we would have the pitchforks out, we'd run them out of town, take
mm-hmm,
them out, right or, that's not right, that do that, but just use this, you read occasionally these things where, some youth minister, and I'm not talking about the Church of Christ, just talking about in general, is having relations with a 12-year-old boy, or a 12-year-old girl, or that.
that's right,
And there would be people, that occurred in this congregation, I'll tell you what, I'd be probably one of the first ones, finding a pitchfork and,
yeah,
but other sins, well, they're in a certain thing, and that, it's just it's not that it may be the sin, but it also may be the people. That's what you talk about
Right.
hypocrisy. Those people are good people, and they're dealing, yes, their daughter is in an unscriptural marriage, and she's still coming in here, or their son is, and their mother's still, but they're good parents, and if we do that, that's gonna hurt them.
right, oh, yeah.
No.
Well, when you find yourself doing a lot of justifying, then that's when you need to take a deep, hard look at what's actually going on. And that probably is going to let you know you actually need to deal with it, and deal with it even quicker than, than not. Namika?
But let's just say, for instance, using Chad's example, if you have a congregation that has elders, and you have someone who is coming and has place membership or wants place membership of congregation, should it not be their responsibility to go and see about this person who has this interest, get to know this individual, to find more out about this individual? Because it seemed like either the minister or the elder would have this knowledge, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they would not broadcast that to the congregation,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not their place. But it, for a congregation that didn't have any elders, then, most people would directly just go to the minister, most people, And if they decided to share that, it would have to be, in my opinion, my thought process, at the discretion of the leader or the leaders of that congregation, what to do with the information that is being delivered to them. Not sit up here and say, hey, this dude just shot the clerk, down the street, or he did that a few months ago, now he's out,
Right,
No.
right.
Now if he's broadcast all over the news and stuff like that, and they needed to address the congregation in a very tactful manner,
Mm-hmm.
then that would be their decision to do, not necessarily put him on blast, but to talk about, hey, you can't talk about this person, you got something in your own now, so to speak, that kind of thing.
Right, absolutely. Well, here's the thing about that, Namika, is that the thrust of 1 Corinthians chapter 5 is everyone knew that this man was in this situation. The whole church knew. So let's say, when Chad was asking about, well, what kind of sin situation, and, I'm going to go ahead and kind of tip you off a little bit as to Sermon on Sunday. let's say someone's dealing with addictions, okay? And those addictions are demons that, you know, some people deal with that essentially their whole lives, right? And it could be, now are addictions sinful? Yes, they're sinful. But the nature of those is that you want to work with that person as much as you possibly can to get them out of that addiction situation. And you might have to give them 100,000 tries, you know? Keep forgiving them, but just because of the nature of addiction. Now, it might be that everyone knows that this person struggles with alcoholic beverage and drunkenness, and, you know, he winds up in a vehicular homicide situation. Well, you know, now what are you going to do? So you've been working with them, and, you know, they've fallen off the wagon several times, but now they really have, I don't know, crossed the line, if you will. So to us, it's okay. Well, drunkenness, that's sinful, but he's repenting, but now we've got this other situation where now everybody knows here we got, you know, an even larger problem. So, you know, so it does kind of, how many people know? Does most of the congregation know? Is it just between one or two people? You know, the leadership probably knows, but nobody else does. You know, type of a scenario. But when everybody knows, we have to be more forthright in handling that situation.
Absolutely, I'm sorry, and I wasn't tracking what Chad was saying, I was just saying.
Oh, no, that's fine.
But I will say that in instance in that respect, you know, the church as a whole, you know, and if we're talking about a specific congregation, you know, has to be careful that word hypocrisy up there, because one person can go and look at this other person for this terrible crime or sin that they have committed, and that they're better because they hadn't committed an offense like that.
Right, yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
Some people can cause a lot of damage just by that pink palette in your mouth.
That's exactly right. Oh, yes. And that does really more damage than anything else. James chapter 3. Linda?
Another reason why sometimes it's being neglected while the preacher's not preaching on that subject is because no one desires to serve that capacity. They first of all have to desire.
Mm-hmm.
And if nobody is coming forward to say that they desire to serve in that office, then preacher doesn't just sometimes they feel like, well, there's no need for me teaching on it.
Right.
Or it might be no one meets the qualification.
Mm-hmm.
Little congregation, well, enough little people, and then they might say, well, nobody reached the qualification, because I was a congregation where nobody met the qualification. Even though it's still taught, but it's taught further down, it was years before they actually started teaching on that subject, elders and deacons. And so that might be another reason why preacher doesn't, kind of hesitates to talk about it, because nobody
Right.
wants to serve.
Right. Yeah, which is why congregation needs elders. Because when you do have a situation like, you know, like this, you have a public sin situation and someone does need to be withdrawn from, then if you don't have elders, and let's say the preacher is a strong, sound individual, guess what's going to happen? Every single time the church is going to split, because the preacher says, okay, here's the situation we need to withdraw from. Then the weak members, no, we don't need to do that, you see. because we might offend brother so-and-so, because by the way, brother so-and-so is the largest contributor to the work, you see. And now you just, the church is split, where when there are elders, that's not a guarantee that the church isn't going to be split. I'm not saying that. But there's a better chance that that will not occur if they are truly the leaders that God wants them to be. And instead, what they could do is, if they have been, okay, here's our boundaries, then they will continue to establish those. It would actually cause a congregation to grow, if not numerically, at least spiritually. And that would be, just a much better situation. But you're correct. When you don't have leaders in the congregation, then definitely a heavy subject such as this is almost, you're right. Why would you teach on this subject? Because who's going to follow through with it? So that is a problem as well. Okay, any other thoughts or questions? Oh, Linda, go ahead.
Just something that kind of throw out. It has been said that the preacher is over the elder. And I know that we talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
But that still goes on in the Lord's church.
Right.
There's controversies in the congregation of my sister worship that. And it's like, they can't go any further because there's controversy over who's over the church.
Right.
Well, first of all, Christ is the head of his own body.
Mm-hmm.
Then he set everything in order. When Timothy was told to go set elders in every city, that was so that the congregation could have order. And they could have shepherds to shepherd the flock so that the wolves wouldn't come in.
Exactly.
It's wolves, that's what the Bible says.
That's right.
And not sparing the flock.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a necessity to have elders. But I've never
Absolutely.
read where the preacher was over the elders. I know he appoints. He has the ability to
Mm-hmm.
appoint elders,
That's right.
but he is not over them.
Yeah. No one is above the elders. The elders are the leaders of the congregation. First of all, nowhere in the New Testament do we ever have a congregation that is preacher-led or one person-led. There's not even one elder over a congregation. Anytime you have elders, it's always plural. You always have a plurality, more than one. And so you must have two or more. And now, in our situation here at Cape Fear, the preacher also happens to be an elder, right? So you can't have that situation, but even then, since this is where we are, am I over the Cape Fear Church of Christ? No. As a matter of fact, Wade, how many times do I come to you, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? And by the way, texting is a great thing. Wade is so tired of me asking. He looks at his phone. I know he just, it's Byron again. No, he does not do that. Go, Chad. That's right. But that's, that's the reality of our situation. So when I do not make decisions for the Cape Fear Church of Christ by myself. I do not do that. The eldership makes decisions for the Cape Fear Church of Christ. And so, by the way, Wade does not make decisions for the Cape Fear Church of Christ. I have to say that too, don't I? Because that's not how it's done. The eldership makes decisions. So it's not even a one person, whoever that one person is. So whether it's the preacher, whether it's the preacher elder, whether it is the strongest elder, you know, in an eldership, so that's just not who runs the congregation. It is the eldership that leads the congregation. And by the way, leadership in the church, does that mean that they just tell everybody what to do? Is that what leadership is? That's not even what leadership is. In the church, elders are to be the examples. That's church leadership. I'm going out and I'm working and doing and influencing others for the cause of Christ. Do elders have to make decisions? Well, obviously they do. But that's not their main job in leadership. The main job of leadership is to be an example. And so, you know, to say you have to run everything through one person, that's not even good leadership. That might be good dictatorship, but it's not good leadership. Tori?
From my childhood past experiences in rural churches, I can give an example of this happening that was that I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
So one day there was Bobby and Sue at church, and they'd been married. And all of a sudden Sue goes away. And then 6 months later, Betty is with Bobby.
Right.
Well, the way I remember that happening is then there was a men's meeting. And then the next week, there's no Betty and Bobby.
Right. Right,
So,
yeah.
you know, but I would say a lot of it from childhood experiences in small churches would be the ignorance of how to act.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, looking from adult now back on that, maybe it should have been talked about more, maybe it was, I remember this from childhood.
Right.
But that's an example I remember.
Mm-hmm. There are so many different situations, Tori, that are so similar to that, or it is, you know, just personal situation. We didn't even get to chapter 6. That's hilarious. You know, those personal situations where, when there are no elders involved, then all kind of things do occur that are not according to the scriptures. We see a methodical situation. We see a situation that, you know, there were questions, there were conversations, and time elapses. It's not just, you know, oh, well, Bob and Betty came 1 week and then we don't see them anymore. No, there's more discussion, there's more teaching about it. But that also is true. Children do not ever get the full story, and neither should they get the full story.
And that could be an example of that.
And that could be an example of that.
And never believe their version of a story they think.
Oh yeah, no, that's true too. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Okay, that said,
Yes. All right now.
that said, Al, let's say that you're gonna have somebody removed from the church,
Right.
and you're going to explain it.
Yes.
Did the children leave?
No, I mean,
Well, I'm just curious.
no, that's fine. So what we would probably do, now, you know, this is all obviously very theoretical, hypothetical, okay? So let's say we did have Bob and Betty came on Sunday. First of all, Wade and I would talk to Bob and Betty, okay? And then, because now everybody knows the situation. Well, then, you know, elders are talking. Not too much time, but a little bit of time goes by, let's say a couple of weeks. And then nothing has changed. Okay, well now we need to say, church, here's the situation. So here's how we would take care of that. Is after the conclusion of the morning service. Now what we might do is ask all the visitors to leave. We might do that. Matter of fact, we probably would. Because this would be what we call an in-house situation. So our visitors then would leave, and then the elders would say, okay, here's our situation. And Bob and Betty might be sitting there, I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, I don't know. But sin is in the camp. We're going to give Bob and Betty 2 weeks. And at the end of that 2 weeks, if they have not repented, then we have to withdraw fellowship from them. Please help us to communicate with them and ask them to repent. So that's what the elders would solicit the help of the congregation before withdrawal takes place. It's not just the elders that are trying to get them to come back, but now the whole congregation is involved in this, with this. So is Matt going to be, there listening to this? Yeah, he'll be there. Is he going to understand any of it? No, but that's okay. That's all right. See, here's the other thing, and I'm glad you brought this up. And I know we're going long, but this is important. What we do as God's people needs to be as open as possible. We don't do things behind closed doors and make deals, and you know what I'm saying? We don't need to be doing that. We need to, if it comes to that situation, it needs to be before everybody. I mean, that's what the Lord said. If the few people can't bring him, then you have to put it before the whole church. So, this is what we call an open society here. This is not something that we just close off, from that point of view. Yes, ma'am.
So, us having kids, we're pretty open and honest with them about things, and they're allowed to ask questions.
Absolutely.
We do also have the power to be like, you're too young to know everything.
Right. Absolutely. So, but the elders would leave it up to the parents' discretion on something like that, What do we want? I mean, obviously there are some things that are very sensitive in nature. We would probably have a discussion, reasonable, but we'd be reasonable. But ultimately, we don't keep things behind closed doors. When you expose sin, you expose it to the light of the world. That's how you deal with it. So everybody knows, okay, this is the situation. Everybody's clear on that. Yeah. Okay.
And depending on some of the sins that we've inferred and applied tonight, when you do things behind closed doors, that's going to end up on actual use on WRL's webpage.
Absolutely. And, and we don't want that. That's not what the Lord expects out of his people. And, so we can't be a part of all of that. We have to be open, we have to be honest, we have to be as kind as we possibly can, deal with the issue at hand. So, true and false next week? You won't be here. That's not cool. Yeah, we'll miss it. I'll give you that.
It's because you said some mean things to her.
Yeah, I said some mean things. That's the problem. Well,
She said I put the cup where I want to put the cup.
That's right.
Was that the mic I got?
Oh, yeah, I think I blew in that mic.
It's
Let me turn it off. Thank you very much.
By the note, on Wednesdays I get this thing.
I know.